Okay, good evening everyone. First of all, thanks for hanging around. It was a bit later than expected. Declan gave us a nice introduction. We're probably going to do something different to what Declan thinks we're going to do. In that we are going to look back over the day that's been, and we're going to pick out, I suppose, some of the most interesting topics that have come up, and we're going to put our own slant on us. So the panel haven't had really any questions from me yet. They haven't had any time to prepare, so this is going to be a fantastic panel or a complete car crash, depending on how it works out. So, first of all, to introduce the panel, we have, starting at the far side, Aidan Holton. Aidan is representative of the International Council and CEO of the Monument Group. Then we have Helen O'Sullivan. Helen is representing the Reinsurance and Captive Council and CEO of the Access Group. We have Donal Clancy, CEO of Laya and representing the Health Council. We have Kelleher, President of Insurance Ireland, formerly Chair of the Life Council and also CEO of Arc Life. And beside me then we have Quinlan, CEO of Aviva Ireland and representing the General Insurance Council. So I'm going to start off. I suppose I really enjoyed the speaker from AXA, Thomas, and his observations. And he said, Aidan Holton, that we need to have, the reason he got the CEO job in AXA was because AXA said he had a vision and he was capable of reinventing himself. So I suppose if we look at this industry, and if I were to say to you that we have a vision of having a world-class insurance industry in Ireland, we have that vision because of Brexit and what's happened. We have an opportunity. Do we have in Ireland, in our insurance industry at the moment, are we capable within the industry of grasping that opportunity? Are we capable of building a world-class insurance industry now?
Sorry, I'm not sure if the mic is live. Yeah, we are now. I suppose Brexit in particular, it's the only time I'm going to mention it. I hope Brexit isn't making us lazy because, to be honest with you, for the last couple of years, attracting insurance businesses into Ireland, given the particular circumstances, has been a bit like shooting fish in a barrel. But Brexit will end. Even I believe Brexit will end somewhere and sometime and somehow. So if you look beyond that, in terms of the capabilities we have, I work across a number of jurisdictions, about 6 or 7 different jurisdictions. And in each, compared to each of those, I think Ireland has very significant advantages in terms of kind of our work culture, in terms of our interpersonal styles, skills and the supply of talent. So I think we're really, really, really well positioned to make the most of that. In terms of the kind of the regulatory environments, I mean, I mentioned those 6 or 7 different jurisdictions. There isn't a single CEO and none of my colleagues who are saying, oh, our regulator's a pushover, you should really come and do more in our jurisdiction. So to be honest with you, it is a level playing field from that point of view, from my perspective. So we have the talent, we have the skills, and we have the experience. So, there's absolutely no reason why we can't be successful. And in fact, we probably have those things in more abundance than any other jurisdiction I operate in.
And so Donal Cullinan said that in terms of building the industry, and I think we all agree with him, right? The central bank doesn't have a role to play. So who's going to drive it, Aidan? Who are the people or the institution, the organisation, whose job is it to build the industry for us?
Sorry, is that back to me again?
That's you, Aidan.
I suppose, the CBI have been very consistent in that message. In fairness, they've been very, very clear. It's not our mandate, it's not our job. So I suppose that, first of all, that's always been very clear and very consistent. In terms of whose job it is, I'd answer that in 2 parts. Each of us internally do a huge amount to pull business and to pull jobs and risk and everything else onto Irish balance sheets, onto Irish entities. So to be honest with you, it is a significant part of our job to do that. To be slightly flippant, if I look at it the other way, the CBI are only going to get more work, the more industries, the more insurance businesses that come here. So for somebody like you, for someone like James Grennan, John Larkin, you guys are going to get the extra fees. So to be honest with you, it's between all of us. We'll pull business in from the inside, and you guys need to be advocates and other practitioners and other professional services firms as well.
Here. Can I just pick up one of the things Aidan said there? Because I agree with Aidan. Can you hear me? It is incumbent on all of us. And as someone, we're directly owned by a UK closed book consolidator, ultimately owned by Swiss Re Group, massive global group. And I know the topic of regulation and the CBI and, regulatory arbitrage, has come up over the last few years. And I'd have to say, in terms of my own business group, and they have put additional business in Ireland in the last couple of years, their perspective on the Irish regulator actually comes from me and what we say, what we talk about in our business. So I do think we have a job, to promote, as you say, but to be careful. And I think it's okay sometimes to have a bit of a moan in lodge. Like, everybody's allowed to do that. But then I think to remember that be careful what we say. We are ambassadors. I don't think for a company like your parent, or for most of our parents, they don't want to come here because it's kind of a Mickey Mouse regulatory regime anyway. So that's not going to be the deciding factor. But I do think we all have a critical role to play here. I feel when I turn to talk to you that I'm not mic'd up, so I think I'll keep talking that way.
I agree with you, but I think it has to be more than regulation. It has to be a combination of factors. So regulation is just one aspect. We have a decent tax offering in the country as well. I don't think we can forget that, especially as that gets developed through the OECD and the work they're doing with BEPS and base erosion. They're planning on introducing a minimum tax in their Pillar 2 initiative. That's coming down the track. It could be something that we would look at as an to attract more business into Ireland where we do have a minimum tax. And also, some of the initiatives today on climate change, what was said around CAT modelling, maybe we can be a centre of excellence for innovation as well around that.
Okay. Thanks, Helen. Donal, where do you see the opportunities?
I don't want to admit this, but I find myself agreeing with Aidan in some respects.
That's
but,
unusual.
That's not right. There's something wrong there. But first of all, I'd like the opportunity as I did love Claire's last bit. I thought that was great. And when you hear about the future home, I think the first thing is in this group here, we have to start talking simpler. A lot of the stuff today, I'm sure, if I paid attention more, I might have understood it more. But a lot of it is just, it's our own speak. And if we do that to our customers, it's going to be a very hard thing for them to understand. We've got to change that environment. And we talk about the future home, which is absolutely fantastic. And I find myself in the senior bracket there these days, which is kind of worrying. Not the grandparent yet that I know of, but I think one of our biggest opportunities is actually a combination of being in a jurisdiction that speaks English, that has a common law code that stands up and has a decent regulator. And that aside, I think the people in this room and being advocates, as Anne was saying, is the way that we're going to grow and develop the business in Ireland. With regards to the simplicity, I believe that the key message I'm getting from our customers, and I think it's a great opportunity in Ireland. We're really innovative if we put our heads to it. A lot of the research that's out there, we can adapt and put it to a practical application as a country, not just as an insurance industry, and we should do it. I don't believe that we as an industry have done that to date, though. Okay. I think we haven't adopted the simple English thing. I didn't hear a lot of it today.
Okay. John, I suppose the general industry has been kind of getting a tough time recently. What needs to be done to reform that industry?
Well, we're with the Oireachtas committee today, Darren, and I think there's a couple of points. Firstly, one of the debating points was you're making a fortune. That's just not the case. If you look at our figures last year, we made 58 million. And you think, well, that's not bad on, just north of 500 million. But your combined operating ratio, which is your premiums less claims, less expenses, over that 7-year period is 97. So for providers of capital, they want, €5 in every 100. That's not unreasonable. So if you look at the componentry of €100, 65% is going in claims, of which 30% is legal fees. 12% is our expenses, €3 is our profit if we can get it, and 11 is levies, including uninsured drivers. So we have very few, with the exception of FBD, a really good company, standalone Irish listed insurers. So we need to attract foreign capital. So in the first instance, we need to get the message out in terms of what's the reality. I think we did a good job on that today, all the players. I think it was easier going in the second time round. We knew what some of the key challenges were going to be. And I think we got into very simple language. And I think that was used today in terms of this is what the returns are. I spoke to a name and a former colleague of mine who's a very well-known Lloyd's broker about what's happening in Lloyd's and the retreat of capital, not just from Ireland but from the UK as well. They have to write for an underwriting profit. So business plans are being turned down. That's a huge issue. So the communication of the reality is really, really important. And we then have to be grown up about the fact that the cost of claims is 4.4 times higher for the main peril within the liability area, which is whiplash. And we can't have that continue because, capital is footloose and it won't come here. So I think it has to be somewhere where capital is attracted. In a low interest rate environment, that means underwriting profitability. It's kind of boring stuff. It's not, sexy to sell. I was explaining the fact that, the Apple iPhone makes a margin of 60%, Ryanair 20%, Kerry Group, 12, 14%. Most intermediaries will be in the very high teens or very high 20s, and we're looking for 5. So there's something seriously wrong when there's an issue in making money. The cost of Quinn's liquidation will be 2 billion to the Irish Exchequer and many other in recent times. So I think we need to be much better at communicating a simple message, the need to make money, and we need to get Lloyd's and other people passporting back in here to create that stimulus. And going back to the broader question about, what can we win in Ireland, I think we need to pick our fights. The first thing I ever worked on as a young kid was the acquisition of Guinness Peat Aviation by GE. It's fascinating what's happened to all those little acorns since then, the likes of Donal Slattery, and we're now the biggest hub globally for aircraft leasing. So it can happen. And I don't accept that anybody isn't involved or shouldn't be involved. Nobody gets a free pass. And if the vision that was outlined in April this year with the senior and deputy ministers for finance in relation to a strategy for 2025, everybody needs to be involved. And that includes infrastructure, places to send your kids to school, houses to live in, etc. And we've a great opportunity.
Well said. Very good. Okay. The next topic I want to move on to is one that I'm really struggling with, I have to say, right? So we've heard a lot today about the environment and sustainability. And if I'm being honest with you, I'm a bit skeptical of what I've heard, right? So we all get, and I feel very bad today having heard all that, we all get that the planet's dying, it's our fault, we're bad people, we're killing the earth, lots has to be done. And I think everyone gets that we need to do something. And I've heard today that, I've heard a lot about values, I've heard a lot about principles, I've heard a lot about recommendations. Like I heard the UN, I don't know if the speaker for the UN is still here, the UN principles, like they could relate to anything, right? They don't mean anything to me, the principles about embedding stuff in your processes and being accountable. I heard about the values of some of the insurers, again, it didn't mean a whole lot to me. So I suppose I'm wondering whether the industry, when it comes to sustainability, is talking a good game, but not necessarily playing one. And I'm wondering whether there's a challenge between sustainability and profit. So I suppose my question for you, Helen, can we be a sustainable industry, and can we stand by values of sustainability and at the same time expect the industry to be able to make a profit? Is there a clash there?
Hello, I think my mic is off.
You've no mic.
Is that on? Is that on, yeah?
Yeah.
Okay. This one isn't sustainable. It's too small, so I have to use this one. We wonder how sustainable this thing is. It's very hard. I mean, you can sit in any room, you can get 20 different points of view. I was in a meeting yesterday with a group of underwriters debating a policy in relation to an investment that we were looking at. I won't go into the details, but there was a heated debate. Sustainability, for my part, I'm a big supporter of the agenda personally, and I think there's an onus on everybody in this room and outside the room and in society to make sure we have a sustainable environment for the future. There was a couple of things said today, very strong statements. John said it was the biggest challenge of our time. I agree with him. There was the quotas for 1.5 degree versus 2 degrees and what that's going to do to our environment. We heard from Zelda that it's not just about fossil fuels, it's about antibiotics in our food. So the list goes on and on and on, and every day you open a paper, we hear about it. So I think that we can't keep our heads in the sand. You're an ostrich if you do. I think Donald Trump is one of the few people who believes that there isn't such thing as climate change. So I think our shareholders require us to do something about it. I think there's an onus on us as individuals and as companies to act. Now, how we act is kind of, I suppose, going to be the interesting part of the debate, because is it about not supporting the agricultural sector anymore if they put antibiotics in food? Is it about cutting off coal? So I think that we have to kind of conscientiously look at our books, see where we can improve things, and really just drive that agenda forward. So for me, it's not about really pulling out of every industry that there is, but it's about supporting the industries that we know are going to sustain us in the future. At Axis, we are a big supporter of renewables. We're one of the top 5 players in that space. Okay. So I think it's about making positive statements and like acting with our feet as we go forward, and those practical steps that we can take.
So, and I suppose picking that point up, so Owen mentioned about the investment side, so we're doing things on the investment side. But we hear about low interest rates and how that's killing insurers and they can't make a return. Can you really then expect insurers on top of that to worry about sustainability when looking at the investments? Is this really achievable?
Sorry, I thought you were still talking to me. I think that, and I'll let you go, I'll be very quick, but I just want to say something about our exposures to catastrophes over the past few years. You know, I think that it's necessary that we make the changes. We've experienced huge losses from catastrophes and wildfires, storms everywhere. And unless we make changes, I wonder how sustainable our core business is going forward.
Good point. Okay.
I mean, I think on this issue, am I mic'd now? Because it does, okay. I think on this issue, it feels to me like there's, you know, we've all seen the events of the last few weeks. There's this massive movement. It does feel like it's a tipping point, and that we are sitting around the table, I'm certainly speaking in my own house, and having real conversations about, well, what about our own habits? What about flying? What about, you know, that seems to be happening in a way at the moment than it probably hasn't been for a while. It was interesting to hear a lot of the speakers talked about the science and how much better that's got and how much more information we have now than a couple of years ago. So it does seem to me the big debate here is about, at the moment, we all operate in the short term. Governments are elected for a few short years and then they're gone. Results are on a quarterly cycle. So we're going to have to move. If we're going to save this planet, we all have to move to a more long-term thinking. And listening to the other speakers, clearly government has a very important role. You can see that, you know, the role the UN are playing. A lot of people talked about IOPA today. The customer has a role. So you're going to have, you know, I suppose, a push in terms of government and saying you need to do these things. And you're going to have then pull in terms of customers, especially the younger ones, the millennials who, in terms of we're all going to be looking at our spending habits, and equally are going to be saying, well, what about my pension payments? You know, where are they going? But what I would take away from today, and specifically on interest rates, I don't think they're mutually exclusive. I think that just puts further pressure on companies to say, you know, how can you, you know, get better yield? And there is ways of getting better yield from, you know, looking at, I suppose in my own entity, I know the RCIO, they're investing now in more infrastructure loans, and they're doing their research and, you know, making sure that from an ESG perspective they're satisfied. But it does seem to me that there's no long-term plan anywhere. And that's and we're not going to solve that problem today. But, you know, we talked about, like, I thought Zelda was very interesting talking about if they stop investing in coal today, somebody else is just going to take over. So it's about working with the companies who are, you know, who have the coal to move them to something else. So there has to be transition. But, like, the transition has to be planned soon, or we're all going to run out of time. And that's it. And it's same. Look, in Ireland, we're all aware of the issue with agriculture, but, like, people's livelihoods are at stake here. So you've got the short term, the immediate impact on individuals and the long term. Like, I don't think we have any solutions today, but we've got to get moving. And as an industry, what did we hear that number? Was it 30 trillion or 300 trillion? Like, the numbers are so enormous. Do you know what I mean? It's hard to get. As an industry, we have a role to play. And for me, that's one of the takeaways from today. You know, we are all influencers, and we need to play our part domestically, but we need to play our part in the corporate world as well.
Okay, so I'm going to say something controversial. So, Aidan, can I ask you this question? I think when I hear insurers say, we can't just stop investing in oil because we have to transition out of oil. We have to help the oil companies transition by 2050, which is 30 years away. To me, that sounds like a complete cop-out, right? Is the insurance industry serious about this, or is it a lot of principles and policies?
Well, I mean, okay, I'm definitely not an expert, and I'm equally probably as frustrated and as confused as everybody else in this one. I suppose I'll put it this way. Saving the planet by tweaking your strategic asset allocation does feel a little bit indirect. I mean, it's like trying to push a thumbtack into a wall through a mattress. So, I mean, it's to be blunt, it can't do any harm. Don't get me wrong, it can't do any harm. Its sentiment is right and it's heading in the right direction. But if you're talking to an industry, and I don't know, I mean, people quote tens of thousands of people that we employ and so on, there's so much more we can do from a direct action point of view, you know, this evening when you go into work tomorrow morning, in terms of flexible working, take your people out of the commuter rat race, you know, the office environment, challenging some of the policies around communication. You know, I still hear debates about whether emailing customers constitutes writing to them. That sort of rubbish. So, I mean, I'd far rather we let the funds industry continue to point in the right direction, but it does feel a bit slow and a bit indirect. We, as management and the people who set the direction for the industry, have an opportunity to do an awful lot more direct stuff. So I'm not in any way discouraging, but I'd rather not leave it to tweaking the strategic asset allocation of a firm. There's lots more we can do that are much more direct interventions, in my view.
You do have to acknowledge there's a legacy environment here that we have to work our way out of. I mean, I think Anne's point with regards to the bigger picture is where the real money is at. You know what I mean? If we can solve that problem and get a decent plan, and these are plans at a European level, even Mr. Trump and those have to get on board with this eventually, or whoever's the next in line for that. It's at that level where it'll really, really count. I think here today, Aidan, I would agree with you that, you know, we can do our bit, and I don't want to take from it, Helen. We had this debate earlier on, but at the end of the day, if we don't solve the bigger problem that's there and evolve out of the legacy systems that we have today, be they using coal or antibiotics or working our way through these at a degree, and you've some chance if it's 2030, 2040. Anything sooner, you've no chance if there's no plan.
Okay, so moving on to the next topic then. So one of the topics we heard about today was on the human capital side. And so a lot of talk about millennials and what they're like. But I suppose, John, what we hear about in Dublin at the moment is a war for talent. There's a shortage of really good people because of new entrants coming in and creating a market. Are you seeing that? How are you dealing with it?
I think there's always a war for talent, Darren, and I think all of us involved in business and in trying to develop high-performance teams, there's always a very small number of people that really drive a business, whether there's a boom or a bust economic environment. I think it ebbs and flows in terms of technical resources, so actuaries, people in the digital space at the moment are in short supply, but good people are always in thin supply. So for me, it's incumbent on companies to have brilliant training and development. We tend not to. We've outsourced a lot of it. My daughter is doing business and law at the moment, and she wrote to one of the big four accountancy firms, and it was interesting because she met the managing partner, and he had a really exciting project called IFRS 17. And she wanted to go interrailing, and he said, listen, this is a really good project, but we don't pay. Good old accountancy firm. Well, she said, I don't work for nothing. She takes after her mother. And he said, well, fair enough. But she worked for a month, but she was blown away by the induction program. And she's definitely going to go back next year if she's going to do accountancy. And at that touch point, you need to be really, really good, and we certainly aren't. So I think we have a lot to do to be much better in terms of searching for, evaluating, closing, and keeping those people over a long period of time. And you know it yourself, Darren, more than our business. It's purely human capital, and you really have to look after people. So, you know, whether it's boom or bust, I don't think is a huge issue. There will be certain cohorts that will be thinner on the ground, but how good are you long term in terms of attracting, retaining, and developing talent? And that's a big challenge for all of us, probably now more so than ever before in a period of full employment.
And would you see a value in the insurance industry having, like, for us in our firm, we have like a training program, apprenticeship program? Do you have an apprenticeship program?
Massively, yeah. And we again, inclusion and diversity, and it's a big thematic for all of us. And we had 4 young graduates over looking at, you know, why haven't we got more women in the business, and why haven't we got women in more senior positions? And one of the things we agreed to do was go and talk to secondary schools in the area, so not far from where we work. And it was fascinating how bad we are at selling what we do. It's a brilliant industry. It's a really interesting industry, you know, but we don't sell that well. So it starts again at grassroots, Darren, and I think there's a huge opportunity. It's a really, really interesting business, insurance, far more interesting than, you know, lots of traditional industries, in my opinion. Certainly the way banking has gone now, it was at a point in time where if you were a bank manager in a branch, you had a lot of, you know, discretionary decision making. That's changed a lot. So we've really exciting roles, but my God, that's not how we sell and market it. And I think there's a big opportunity to dramatically improve that.
Yeah, fair enough. Okay, next topic I want to look at is just the relationship with the customer. So Donal Quinlan, our new head of insurance supervision at the central bank, was here earlier, and Donal said that the central bank wants insurance companies to start putting the customer at the heart of everything they do. And so, Donal, are insurance companies not doing that already?
I'd say some companies are and some companies aren't. I think from a Laya healthcare point of view, I remind people of this. Laya means looking after you always, and it's looking after the customer always. So we start from there. And I honestly believe that we're making a hell of a stab at it. We're improving all the time. As an industry, we're definitely, and I'm talking about the health insurance industry, you know, we are a community-rated market, and I really personally like it after having worked in the different types of market. I think it is very, very customer-focused. Each contract in the health insurance market is an individual contract. From a Laya point of view in particular, I'm proud of the fact that we are the #1 in the customer experience index, and in fact I think we're #1 of any insurer in the customer experience index, and I think we're top of the pile with regards to where we are in that. So I do believe that there is a lot of work done, and particularly by ourselves, but on the other hand I honestly believe we've an awful lot to do. I talked about it earlier on there, our use of language. In our case, we need to hold the hand of the customer far more than we do. It's a very intangible product that we sell health-wise. You know, they need an assistance going through the journey. It's not as simple, you know, it's not as much as a commodity item, if I can say, from a general insurance point of view, in a lot of cases anyway. And I do think that, yeah, we've definitely made some progress on it, and we've a hell of a lot more to go on it. That's the way I would say it.
Okay, and Aidan, so Donal's grand. But the rest of the industry, when Donal Quinlan comes out and says the insurance industry needs to start looking after its customers, have we taken our eye off the ball? Are we not looking after our customers properly? What's the reason for that?
Well, I suppose it started there. I mean, the whole premise and the whole purpose of what we do kind of started centered around the customer and sharing risk and protecting people. But I do think there's a real risk, and you can see it in some places already, but there's a real risk it's a building problem, that there's just so much noise and so much clamour and so many other things competing for attention that actually the voice of the customer and the purpose of the customer actually gets squeezed out. So, I mean, if you think about it, there are still some great stories about needs-based selling. There are still some great stories about, you know, a claims handler handling a very, very difficult case, you know, delivering huge empathy to the customer and really helping them out. But to be honest with you, those stories are you know, too few and far between now. And there shouldn't be the stuff that legends are made of. That is what we're supposed to be doing. I do worry that with all of the other stuff and protocols, procedures, and everything else that are coming at us from all sides, be it from analysts, from regulators, from wherever, that the voice of the customer is the only one that's not actually getting louder. Now, to combat that, I suppose you need to make sure that the boards and the regulator, I'm glad Donal said that, and I really hope that they live to the spirit of that, but boards and the regulator really, really need to make sure that no matter what else happens, this agenda is not getting crowded out, because the tone from the top and the pull effect of your boards and regulators absolutely govern what goes on inside an organisation. And if you get that clear pull and clear prioritisation of the customer and looking after the customer, protecting the customer is what we're all about, well then, to be honest, the entire rest of the organisation, no matter how big it is, will turn on a dime. So, I've been through, and probably, I'm guessing, 30-40% of the room here are probably in PCF roles. So, the next PRISM interview, what percentage of my next PRISM interview is actually going to be specifically focused on caring for the customer? How can we be sure that you're the right guy to be looking after this customer's money or whatever insurance product it is? So,
what percentage of your last PRISM interview was focused on the customer?
Yeah, we're late in the day, and I'm probably just trying to be discreet enough in terms of criticism. But to be honest with you, it certainly hasn't been at the heart of my PRISM interviews. And I don't want to focus just on the regulator, because to be honest with you, the boards need to pull the kind of the gravitational centre back to that as well. But I am hopeful that they live to that statement.
But I do think not to talk too much about the regulator, but there is a big emphasis on culture.
Yeah.
And part of culture is how you look after your customers, the conduct framework. And I know it feels we're all policied out, with all the policies we're required to have. But I would say, I'm operating in a closed book, so I suppose we don't have the dynamic that some, like the Donal would have, or the John, whatever. You have new customers all the time, and you have the potential to give them new products or to upgrade their products or whatever. But it certainly would be a big, I think that your question to Aidan was, what proportion, what percentage of time in your PRISM interview was talking about customers, and I suppose I get that, because I think that the CBI's emphasis is probably more on the prudential side.
Yeah.
Having said that, they strongly come out about culture and conduct, and I would say a fair chunk of what my board talks about and what my board risk committee talks about certainly is about customer, and I would expect that is, I think the regulator, they've signalled they are going to move more into this space, and so we got to get ready for that, I guess. But I suppose it's helpful if they want to have the conversations as well, because it makes it easier to ensure they happen in the boardroom.
Yeah.
And so, Helen, just I suppose on the reinsurance side, presumably you don't have to worry about the customers; they can look after themselves.
We are the customers.
I wish you could all take care of yourselves. No, that's not true. I mean, all we have really is our capital and our people. Our customers are key to us. In fact, part of our strategy and our culture on our reinsurance book is to make sure that all our customers are well taken care of, and we've recently put strategic account executives. I won't say we put them in the business, but they certainly spend a lot of time with our customers. Key to us is just making sure that our customers' balance sheets are well taken care of, that we're ensuring their volatility. And with challenges like IFRS 17, new solvency standards, and with everything that's happening through Brexit, and even tax changes, we find that customers' balance sheet profiles can change significantly, and we're there to protect that. We're really, really cognizant of looking after our customers. From the reinsurance side, we have insurance customers as well, and we have the same dilemmas, but for a reinsurance perspective, they're equally important to us.
Very good. The final topic I want to pick up on is just innovation, right? So, various chats today about innovation in the insurance industry. Donal, I suppose, anything you're seeing in the health insurance industry which will either kind of help to improve the products or the service you're providing? Anything kind of that we can all easily understand?
I think the biggest role that we have to play as an industry ourselves is actually there's a whole mindset change with regards to the behaviours from managing your health. And particular, rather than look after acute illness, we try to look after you before you get ill. You know, it sounds a fairly obvious thing when you say it, but for a long time, you know, we as an industry looked after you just when you're at the acute stage, or, you know, particular crisis or chronic stage, while I think the industry as a whole is looking at the well-being far more into trying to get your mindset in the right way, so that when you reach that critical point, you're in a better shape. Or, you know, we're also trying to look after you now in a more constructive way after treatment as well. That's only really evolved along with the well-being, and you know the different screenings that can go on, the connecting the dots is far more there than it was in the past. Again, the technology and the future home bit actually will apply to the body of the future as well. You know, you're going to be able to know far more about yourself than you ever did. We're all wearing these devices, but unfortunately or fortunately, you're going to know a lot earlier about aspects of your life that are going to change in the future, I think. And those behaviours and mindsets need to change. Everything from nutrition, which we start at a very young age, get our habits as, you know, primary schools is where you're being hit there. And we're trying to educate. We know a lot about you now, and we should be able to help you, you know, at the particular time in your life to get the information you need, to get looked after when you should be looked after, prompt you to take the action, and when you're in trouble to hold your hand through it. So I think those behavioural mindsets are very important to this industry as a whole, but particularly to the healthcare one.
Aidan, outside of the health insurance industry, because they kind of seem to be on top of it, any other innovative ideas that could be transformative for our market?
I mean, if I was spying on this industry from the outside, it'd kind of look pretty obvious that, you know, if you can have a real passionate care for your customers, you know, competent people and a strong set of ethics, you'll be fantastically successful. And nothing else, just those three things. So something really, really simple: passionate around your customer, technically competent people, and a strong set of ethics in terms of how you manage everything.
But we don't have that already.
Yeah, but we have about 16,000 other things and priorities as well. So, I mean, the good news, I suppose, is that, I mean, maybe that'll come from a disruptor, but the good news is there's so many barriers to entry to somebody who has just those simple principles. Maybe we'll survive a little bit longer. I do worry that, you know, can this industry get to there from where we are at the moment? Now, everything has a natural cycle. So, as you've probably heard me say before, you know, perhaps this industry needs to run its course and eventually die off, and those principles will kind of rise like a phoenix from the ashes. But I think
Sorry, did you say what? The industry can what? Run its course?
Yeah.
Die off.
Think about fax machines. I mean, on your way home this evening, reflect on fax machines and cassette tapes. You know, is the current iteration of the insurance industry the next one on that list? So, I suppose it may come. I think the innovation usually comes from something very, very simple, going back to basics, and I think you almost need to do that from outside the industry as a new entrant or a disruptor or something else. Now, maybe there are people in the room and maybe there's people on the stage who can actually get this iteration of the industry to that point, but it's not without its challenges.
What are the challenges? You mean all the noise in the background?
Yeah.
And how do we get rid of the noise?
Focus. Put the customer at the heart of everything. Run things with a strong set of ethics.
What you're looking for then is a partnership, and I hate to say it, but what you're looking for is a partnership with the regulator to allow industry to focus on that, aside from other things.
I think a more mature relationship between the industry and the regulator, focused around what's key, is perhaps the way to that.
So that could be our vision for the new industry in Ireland.
Perhaps.
Okay, it's very interesting. Okay, Helen, I suppose we better not forget the reinsurers. What's going to make the reinsurance industry grow and be more attractive?
I don't know. It's like, I'm not sure about blowing up the industry given there's a storm coming. I think insurance matters. I think we're key to everything that happens in society. I don't see technology being a huge disruptor. I see being a significant partner to what we do going forward in the future. We hear a lot about big data and analytics. I think that's key to where we're going in the future and key to having us make better risk decisions. Don't have any big innovative solutions. We're working around the edges with technology and robotics and data to make sure we're better informed as carriers.
Okay. John, I suppose one of the things I want to touch on, it's been mentioned a few times today, you've said it yourself as well. Most of the insurance companies in Ireland, most of the people represented here, are subsidiaries of larger international groups. Is it a challenge keeping Ireland relevant within the global group?
Absolutely, Darren. I think anytime I go to a meeting at group, you're somewhat embarrassed. We make 113 million last year, and it's a decent amount of profit in our market. But it's not going to get anybody out of bed at a group level in terms of something that's going to be a game changer for Aviva. So you've got to make sure that you get a good return on the capital that's deployed here, that there's no trouble in the market from a franchise perspective. And then you're looking to innovate and do things more quickly here that maybe can be recycled elsewhere. They're always fascinated that our brand in Ireland has phenomenal recognition for lots of different reasons, including insuring and sponsoring the stadium. But there's a lot more to it than that. That really gets their interest. There's very good net promoter scores, but you can't compete with big Asian opportunities. So it's about being really good at what you do, being a fun place to visit. Don't underestimate the importance of that. But also importing people to help develop them and exporting people as well. And really that's it. We are limited by the size of the prize, but you can add other things over and above that, and you need to do it to stay relevant.
We can go back to Aidan's point. Are we in danger of this massive disruption from new entrants who just take a completely different approach to insurance?
Yeah, there's nobody interested in paying the claims, Darren, which is always interesting. So there's lots of disruption around the intermediated space.
Yeah.
And one of the things I'd comment on or reflect on as we ask the questions about innovation, risk ebbs and flows, and motor is changing dramatically, and driverless cars, etc., and cyber's a new one. Someone said to me recently, one of my kids actually, that a great product that you could definitely sell is to be anonymized. So get off all social media, etc., so that you're kind of untraceable. And I think that may become an interesting phenomenon going forward. So there'll always be new risks to cover. I think one of the big requirements that's coming fast and furious at all of us is to be as easy to do business with as we possibly can. Nobody reads the stuff we send out anymore. And even if they did, they'd have to hire an attorney or a lawyer to understand it. So how we get into a much more straightforward business, even going back to the Oireachtas Committee today, so that people really understand what it is we do. I actually find it incredible, the conversation about, we should be better to customers. We've been here for 250 years. I think all our competitors are really good to customers. We don't make a huge return. We're not really good at selling and marketing what we do. So I think there's a really big opportunity there. And I'm not sure if insurance is going to disappear because there'll always be things to insure. But I think you need to be very nimble in terms of being able to offer new solutions, perhaps more quickly.
We better take some of these.
Sorry,
go on.
Oh, sorry, you have some questions there, but I was dying to have an argument with you, and it's 1 minute to go. We get a chance to have an argument. But I think the industry will survive, and with John and this one here, right? I think we have to pull our socks up, and if we don't, a disruptor will come in and do it for us.
Yeah, I mean, to clarify, I suppose, music didn't die with cassette tape. It just moved on.
Fair enough.
Okay? So insurance won't die. And there'll always be risks to insure, and there'll always be a desire to pool it. So I'm not saying we're music, but we might be the cassette tape.
That's good. I like that. Okay, I'd like to finish there, but we better get to some of these questions. One final question, and put your hand up if you want to take this. Knowing that some insurers have big legacy system in place, how are these insurers going to see innovation happen in their organisations? Who has a big legacy system in place that's going to stop you innovating? Any of you? Anne?
we don't actually do our own administration. We found another solution to that. Somebody else does it worse. But I think it is a challenge, having worked in businesses with big legacy administration, and I think there probably are businesses here where you have to try and do things in parallel, because there's no doubt trying to get those systems slicker, but ideally get off to a better system. You have to do it in parallel to doing stuff that is more digital and more customer facing. And I think a lot of the bigger folk, probably Aviva and the Irish Lives, are doing a reasonably good job of that. But John might have a comment.
I think, Darren, we've a lot of systems, where the core platforms go back to the 1970s and they've been enhanced, right? I don't like big bang change. I've never seen a single case anywhere I've ever worked where they've delivered on time or delivered what was purported to be the benefits. So to Anne's point, I think it's about data capture, analysis and mining. So data itself becomes a huge issue. And I think in terms of the hardware that supports it, it's about agile development. And it's really hard to be good at execution. We've got a great CIO and he's trying to develop a team down in Galway. It's a challenge, but I think the agile development approach is something that I'd certainly be backing financially rather than a big bang change. But it is, the age-old challenge of, can you execute to be much easier to do business with? One of the great innovations of our time, those of us who are old enough remember taking a half day to get our motor tax renewed. Now you do it online. It was life-changing. So for me, we need to do lots of little things like that, Darren.
Very good. Brilliant. Okay, we've out of time. I actually really enjoyed that. So if you wouldn't mind please showing your appreciation for the panel. Thanks very much.